Growing fears of a possible coup in Myanmar as tensions between the military and civilian government escalate. The armed forces have refused to accept November's election results, alleging widespread voter fraud. They've threatened to take action if their complaints aren't addressed. Young Waikit joins us live now for more on this. Waikit, the election was months ago. Why is the military taking action now?
Well, that's a good question, Don, especially when the army chief had initially said that he would accept the election outcome no matter what. And even in mid-November last year, when the army-backed opposition party USDP demanded a re-election because of electoral fraud allegations, the army back then had distanced itself from the USDP. But recently, the army changed its tune. The army now takes fault with the voters list. Now, there are some 38 million voters on that list, and the army says that at least 8 million of them are inaccurate because the names of people who have died, people whose names are too young to vote, they appear on that list, and therefore it leads to potential electoral fraud, and the army wants answers. But Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi's party, NLD, says that the army could not give specific examples of electoral fraud. Recently, the elections officials also released a statement saying that, yes, while its initial voter list, which has been planned with various ministries released, while that has been inaccurate, some of them have been inaccurate, they received feedback and they changed and made amendments to the voter list, and it was published for the second time for public scrutiny. The election officials also say it's impossible for people to vote more than once because voters would have to dip their fingers in indelible ink, and that would last for more than a week. It's also very difficult for people to travel from one voting area to another because back then there were very strict COVID-19 travel measures. Now, what's also important to note is that there are international as well as local election observers who've seen the entire process from the voter list to the day of election, and they say that the election in Myanmar is free and fair. Now, I also want to point out that the elections official will have the final word on these decisions. And for now, it does not seem that the election officials are going to budge and give way to the Myanmar army.
So, Waikit, how have people reacted to these allegations of irregularities?
Well, there is growing and mounting tension because there is possibility of a coup raised by the Myanmar army who have been pressing for an answer with regard to the election fraud. The visible signs today are very clear because in Naypyidaw, there is very heavy police presence. They are stopping people from coming into the capital. They do not want protesters to infiltrate the capital ahead of the parliament sitting next week. In other parts of Myanmar, in Yangon, for instance, there have been at least 2 cases of protests held. And these are people who are supporters of the army and the USDP. They've gone out to the streets to show their support for the army. Now, on an international level, the UN as well as Western embassies based in Myanmar have collectively urged Myanmar to exercise restraint and to stick to democratic norms. Now, right now, there are 2 schools of thought where a possible coup could happen. One school of thought, analysts say that there is still a possibility that there is a coup if the Myanmar army is not satisfied with the outcome of what it's pursuing. But on the other side of the camp, there are analysts who are saying that all these is just a show of force to pressure the Myanmar government, to pressure NLD as well as the election officials to come together, to negotiate and to talk about these allegations of electoral fraud. Whatever it is, I will be keeping a close watch in the next few days for developments.
All right, Waikit, thank you very much for that. Leong Waikit there with that update.